Welcome everybody to This Week in Cannabis Live. I am Jay Rosenthal. That is Jeremy Burke. Over there is Marc Hauser on the bottom. And together in real life, AnnaRae and Ben from High Spirits. AnnaRae and Ben, where do we find you today? That's not California. I can tell by the
I mean,
foliage.
it could be California, but it's not.
we are together and we are in Miami at the Cannabis Summit.
How do we look? Do we look Miami?
We are
You look
sweaty,
very
but it's
Miami.
pretty great.
Very,
Yeah, looks awesome.
Very Crockett and Tubbs.
Can you feel the humidity through the camera?
Yeah, I can feel the humidity emanating. What's the number one thing we should know about where you are and what are you hearing?
Beverages, baby. It's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it's like hashtag three tier. The conversation has been all about the 3-tier system and kind of the best pathway forward, if there is one, for beverage.
Oh,
Okay.
Mark's laughing already.
I called it. I've been saying for years that this is going to end up in the 3-tier system for better and for worse.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. That's the
People
Faustian
just don't want
bargain.
to. People don't want to hear it, but it's been mentioned every other sentence, I think, for every panel for the last 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
enough.
So 3-tier. That's the message. And there still remains a lot of like growth and excitement for the category right now. There's a ton of data that just shows how much consumers love the category, and I think the industry is just grappling with how to best show up in DC, what to ask for, and how to get it done on a timeline that can be feasible for businesses and for the shelves to keep having these beverages available to people where they still are.
Yeah, I would say the most interesting thing for me, is someone who goes to a lot of conferences over the last 10 years, is that there are real heavy hitters in the room here. We have people from Congress, we have people from FDA, TTB. There are executives from biggest retailers, distributors, even some of the suppliers on the alcohol side, and they are here. Like it's not navel gazing. People are actually in the room trying to have the real conversations about how to move this category forward.
And alcohol is driving the conversation broadly. And
That was the plan.
yeah, I think that's why it's moving into this 3-tier model so very clearly, is that this is where it fits.
And it's sorry. One last piece to that, because I know there's a lot of opposition to the concept of the 3-tier system,
and
it's not like.
Just kidding.
No, well, no, it's just I mean, from cannabis and hemp, right? Like people don't want alcohol to own it the way that they currently own alcohol. But here's the thing: like, not all of alcohol likes the 3-tier system, but they all do recognize that is the most palatable way to get Congress to buy into something that is structured and safe.
Speaking
and it
of
exists,
timelines,
so it's
I want to use that as a segue to speak of timelines. The president gave his State of the Union this week, and absent from anything he said was not hockey, which we've been talking about on this show for a while. But what was absent was rescheduling. No mention of it, no conversation of it, which differs actually from Joe Biden's last State of the Union, I will just mention, where he did mention rescheduling and cannabis. Anything we should take away from that other than this is clearly not a priority anymore in DC like it was at the end of December? Mark, you don't look surprised at all.
No, I mean, I don't know why that would surprise anybody. So I don't know. I think it's just another example of anybody in the industry who is hoping that he would say something about it, is just, it's the continued sort of belief that people care about cannabis more than they actually do. And the Congress does more so. And it's just not a priority. There's a zillion other problems. And I mean, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hope for the best and continue to advocate, but it just means we have a harder job to do.
Yes. And is that, sorry, AnnaRae, yeah?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think that means that people aren't talking about it or working on it in DC. I just think it was a broader choice, that it wasn't the moment
Agreed.
There is still a lot of work going on in DC on cannabis, and it
Yeah.
certainly isn't over. And I don't think that it being excluded from content in the State of the Union means that rescheduling or anything that was in the executive order doesn't exist anymore. It's just was chosen to not be as important. It was the longest State of the Union in history, so I guess there was plenty of time that they could have brought it up, or he could have brought it up.
It could have been one thing that he actually got Democrats to stand on. If you watch the thing, he wanted to stand up and sit down. It could have been one thing that he actually did show some bipartisan support, of which he wasn't looking for those things. So that wasn't actually the point of the speech, but it was long, very long. I think you said the longest ever. And if you could beat Bill Clinton on giving a long speech, you have really done something, because that was really some. That wasn't the only news or non-news this week, Jeremy. Where you live in New York, there is going to be a new director of the Office of Cannabis Management, the OCM. That seems to be one positive light, or at least the industry talking about it in a positive light. Give us a little bit of a rundown.
Yeah, sure. So John Kagia, he's been at the New York State Office of Cannabis Management for some time, previously serving as the policy director. Those of us who read Cultivated every day have always seen, John break down numbers. He always had these sort of, at every OCM meeting, super interesting numbers about market growth, market statistics, and how, policymakers are sort of controlling for profitability and all these things. I always found him to be enlightening. He was at New Frontier prior to his jump into public service. And so look, I think the pick being internal signals some stability, right? I think that's number one. And number two, this is a pick that the industry has wanted for a long time. I think if you'd asked people 6 months ago who should lead the OCM, they would have said John, right? And so I think it's a smart pick from Hochul. I think John, in my perception, he's a really awesome guy. He's very, very sharp, very smart, knows how to balance the interests of the industry, of the state, of public health, of social and economic equity and justice, and all the things that are part of the New York cannabis program. So, I'm really looking forward to, seeing what he does at the agency. The first Cannabis Control Board meeting is coming next week. And so I'm sure he'll have, a little bit of a speech to talk about the priorities for this year. But look, I think, things are ticking up in New York cannabis. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy for John.
Yeah. AnnaRae, I saw you give a little clap.
Yeah, I actually have kind of a strong opinion about this, because in California, our home market, as the DCC was launching, they've had a strict policy that they didn't want to hire people that had industry experience. And then that's continued on.
Right.
They put out an RFP to do a public service announcement campaign to kind of bring people into the legal market. And they even said that marketing agencies that applied for the RFP, if they had worked in cannabis before, they were disqualified, which I thought was one of the most ridiculous things. If you specialize in speaking to the consumers that they want to meet and you're disqualified from actually doing the marketing to them, it seemed crazy. And so even when John was initially hired at the OCM, I thought it was a good signal that New York was bringing in people that had existing industry experience, because who better to lead a regulatory agency than someone that understands the complexities and the dynamics. Yep. And his background coming from a data platform is so important, because so many regulators, I feel like, really act on this qualitative kind of understanding, often coming from reefer madness and stigma. And for him to have this data background and then to have brought that to the OCM every step of the way is a really solid signal that New York is actually going to be listening to real information instead of acting on things like stigma, gossip, rumors, and misunderstanding. So I'm really hopeful about this. And I'm also hoping that other states will look at this as oh, okay, maybe this is an unlock, and we should look at people that actually know about cannabis to help us lead, launch, and expand and fix our cannabis industry.
Well, the data portion is really exciting or interesting, because the cannabis industry has more data about its supply chain and what's selling than any other category because of track and trace. And so it's these regulators have just been totally ignoring the fact that they actually have the greatest ability to regulate the industry. And New York is a prime example of falling short of actually regulating. So it's if you can turn that around and use the data to do it, it'll be a great example of what we can do in other markets like California.
Yeah. I will say that in the Canadian landscape, we've had people come and go from the industry to regulators, both on the federal level and the provincial level, here in Ontario for sure. So it's not new here, and it does provide, as you were saying, AnnaRae and Ben, sort of a unique lens, or at least an informed lens that people can have. That often people go from alcohol to cannabis, but in this case, exact example, sort of one for one in the cannabis industry is helpful. And maybe we do see this as a trend other markets will follow, just because the most experienced people are the most experienced people, whether they be regulators or industry side of things as well. Mark, anything to say on this front?
No, I'm in total agreement with this.
What a novel concept. Hire someone that's qualified.
Hire qualified people.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
I wish someone else would have thought of that.
I like that. Speaking, another good transition. Speaking of qualified people, it is earnings season. Well, I hope they're qualified people. It's earnings season in cannabis. Not everybody has reported. We had on Kronos Group earlier today, Jeremy and I, on the Canadian front. But Green Thumb Industries continues to stand out among big MSOs. Who wants to take their first crack at sort of what Green Thumb Industries as a profitable company, which does separate itself from other large MSOs? Jeremy, you wrote a little bit about it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I need to sort of dive deeper into all the financial statements of the big MSOs. But, my quick 30,000-foot view take is, I think Green Thumb Industries CEO Ben Kovler deserves a lot of credit for running a quarter-over-quarter profitable business in this environment, subject to 280E tax and all the things that you all know very much about and all our audience knows about. That's, it's a real feather in his cap. I think it's a hard thing to do. I think it gives the company a lot of flexibility, even in advance of rescheduling, if or when that happens, to make decisions, right? Profitability is a superpower in running a business. And I think that, he deserves a lot of credit. I also think that, that being said, there's not that much interesting in this earnings season, right? I think we've seen the universe of investors, particularly retail investors interested in the space is dwindling, right? Green Thumb Industries is not even really doing earnings calls anymore, and you'd think that this would be a time to do it. And so, look, I think it's a little bit status quo. Some companies are separating themselves, like GTI, but it's going to take federal reform to regenerate the interest in the sector in a robust way. Though, I will say TD Cowen has recently initiated coverage of a couple Canadian publicly traded Canadian cannabis companies. And, banks like TD, I'm not a banker, but, many of my friends are. And from what I understand, bankers don't initiate coverage of small and microcap stocks if they didn't think there was long-term upside to the sector. And so I think that's a big signal that they are diving back in now.
That's Jeremy's version of some of my best friends are bankers. Mark, AnnaRae, Ben, anything to say
Not my best friends.
about the publicly traded companies and sort of their earnings as they roll out? Because it is interesting to see sort of how the big guns are sort of position their earnings vis-a-vis each other.
I'll weigh in that, it is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, AnnaRae. You were about to.
No, you take it, Mark.
Okay. None of this is surprising, but it's still just amazing to me how consistently, the companies in this industry continue to lose money. I mean that seriously. I mean, like it is, it just shows how dysfunctional things are, that that it's just this perpetual cycle. Free cash flow is pretty good for some of these companies, and if you look on on the adjusted basis, a lot of these companies have adjusted EBITDA, but that only gets you so far. And I go back to, it's not just the big companies, but we're talking about large and mid-sized companies too. And it's just the economics of this business make it extremely difficult to make money on a positive net income basis. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the licensed cannabis industry. And like you said, I don't, like Jeremy said, I don't see that fundamentally changing until there's until legalization.
Yeah.
And that's a broad statement. There's clearly exceptions, but go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make the statement. Like Jeremy, I haven't dove into the financial statements. I mostly looked at the headlines, but I'm seeing companies, specifically Trulieve, like report what looked like very healthy gross margins. I think it was 60%, and but still having enormous net losses overall, and that's just very confusing to me, because if you are able to capture a 60% gross margin, I would think that you should be profitable. So I'm really curious of like really what's going on there, and at the same time they're accumulating these massive tax liabilities, not paying 280E, and so is it that the gross margin looks great because they are not putting as much in COGS as other cannabis companies are to make that gross margin look good, because there's something about that metric that's important? I don't really know. I'm not inside there, but there's something that looks a little strange and fishy to me when I look at those numbers at a high level.
Fair enough. AnnaRae and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, but this week you had on Stephen Ernest, who's the head of origination at Chicago Atlantic. What did you learn from him about sort of capital in the cannabis industry and where we stand today versus yesterday versus tomorrow?
Oh man, I don't know. It kind of mirrors like Marc's sentiment. You know, it's kind of business as usual right now. There'll be potential tailwinds when Schedule 3 happens, but it's going to be a long, arduous process. To kind of like get that implemented, but then those tax liabilities will then become actual real liabilities that you have to pay attention to and enter payment plans, and so. The benefit from 280E won't be seen until you get beyond, paying down those sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to the federal government. And so luckily there are people like Chicago Atlantic. And if you're running a good business, then maybe you can get some help on that. But yeah, it's going to be a process to get through all that.
Yeah. I'd say the takeaway for me is that there is capital, in particular debt capital out there, but it is mostly for large companies.
It's mostly for GTI.
It's not just GTI, but it is large companies. Like they're looking to put out facilities that are $5 million plus. So small startup companies, that is not what this is. This is growth capital. This is M&A capital, things like that. And the other piece that I thought was just reinforcing to hear was that these debt holders are not afraid to become operators. And I think that there's been questions about that a little bit of like, are these guys ready to step up? And I think the answer that we heard from Stephen was yes. And we're seeing it happen in various different ways that the debt holders across the industry through restructuring are becoming owner operators. Mm-hmm. Also, he did touch on the fact that they just got behind an ESOP, which I thought was particularly interesting as well. Yeah. So worth listening to, folks.
Yeah, it's a great talk, and I think that they and he is, I think that they've been. I full disclosure, they were a former client of mine when I was practicing, in law firm. That they, they've been much more disciplined. They're sort of one of the last ones really standing on, in terms of sort of credit funds focused on the industry. But yeah, the Vareo play, that sort of there's, they bought Silver Spike 2 years ago or whatever, and then this Vareo play, and as a sort of something of a roll up. It's more not quite a roll up, but is that sort of, it's an interesting way for them to get into ownership. So
Stephen called it, quote, their operating platform, which was the first time that I had heard that.
Interesting.
Interesting. Worth noting.
Interesting. Jeremy, what's on your horizon this week as we go into March?
Yeah, look, I'm hopeful to see just a little bit more of a drumbeat towards federal reform, right? I think, there's a lot of waiting around to see it happen. I think things are going to get a lot more interesting once they do. That being said, like Jay, you and I are always very excited to connect with business leaders in the industry, building their companies, despite what happens to things outside of their control. I think that is, one of the lessons of being in this industry for so long is control what you can control. And we always get unique perspectives from all of the founders, all of the executives we talked to about that. And so look, like, I know that's not sort of a revelatory answer, but, I'm hopeful that, we will see some federal change start to happen, especially as we get closer and closer to the midterms. I'm not going to prognosticate on if it's going to happen before or after, but I do think, the drumbeat will heat up.
Well, it's interesting. We asked Mike Gorenstein the same thing about sort of what any regulatory things he's looking forward to at the U.S. side or on the Canadian side. And he basically laughed. He just said
he did, yeah.
Never. Like it's not how he builds his business, not how they build their business. It's not how he built it in the past. And if you are looking forward to something like that, it could be tomorrow or 10 years from now. So why build against it? So I do like when he chuckles at such things. AnnaRae and Ben, what are you hoping to learn when you're there and take away to take into the world from Miami?
Path forward, if there is one, right? It's like there's a good balance of voices here. Like I said, we heard from Norm from the FDA, which is a little bit of a sobering perspective, as he can often do. But I think it's really clear that the beverage category is unified, that we have some good allies, even on the regulated cannabis side. The industry has largely realized that this is a great discovery and mechanism and a normalization path for the plant. And so if we can get everyone rallied and get clear regulation set, I think there is an appetite for it. We have a number of Congress people that want to sponsor a responsible regulation and create a path forward. And we'll see if it's enough. There's a limited time limit. It's not common to get a bill passed very quickly, so we're going to need some help on the timeline. But yeah, I don't think, generally people don't want to see this form factor go away, and it doesn't sell well in dispensaries. So yeah, I think a lot of us, we're most of us are entrepreneurs here, and our character is typically eternal optimists, but I'm optimistic.
What?
I would say to truly bridge it to the regulated cannabis conversation that we're having also is that, and I won't call them out, but there are a number of the public MSOs that are here and present, and they're hearing the same message as that we're sharing right now. And I think that there is kind of more understanding, collaboration, and alignment maybe than people think. We always talk about that there's all this misalignment, but I think it's getting closer. So that's one other takeaway that I think is worth mentioning. And then the other thing that I'm kind of thinking about is in about an hour, I'm moderating a panel on the investor perspective right now. So I'm really curious to learn about how investors are looking at the environment right now within all of this volatility. Because there is actually capital that continues to come into the space, and so I'm all ears on that to learn how people are approaching it.
Mark, what's catching your attention as we roll into March?
I'm just always on the lookout for strange things in the industry to write about. And I'm sure that the industry will provide. So.
It always does.
It always does.
If it didn't, you wouldn't be able to write about stuff. The newsletter wouldn't get written, and you guys, AnnaRae and Ben, wouldn't have anybody to talk to. Right? Well, I appreciate everybody's time this morning. We will be back next week, and it will be March. We'll be 1 week closer to daylight savings time, mercifully, here in the north, which is helpful. And AnnaRae, I actually caught up in all my watching of Heated Rivalry. So we can maybe discuss how that ended. And actually, this is important. This is for you, AnnaRae. Tomorrow night, Rosenoff is actually hosting Saturday Night Live. So,
thank you for that call out. So
I think Jack Hughes is going to be there too, or something, or Quinn great. Hughes, maybe. I don't know, but
maybe both Hugheses.
Yeah.
Rosenoff, and actually Mumford & Sons is actually the musical guest. So it's like a really
good. I love them. Okay, yes.
So I don't know why I'm doing an ad for Saturday Night Live. They definitely don't need it. But all, whatever it is, 75 people watching now, tune into Saturday Night Live, Saturday night, 11:30 Eastern time. AnnaRae, Ben, Mark, and Jeremy, thanks so much. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.